Morning all. Welcome to Falkirk Council Planning Committee, 12th of November 2025. Being held in Education Centre, Abbots Road, Grangemouth, and in accordance with Section 43 of the Local Government Act Scotland 2003, we will allow attendance by elected members online. This meeting has been live streamed on our channel at falkirk.gov.uk/live. Please ensure all phones are switched off, please. I am Councillor Ralph Kelly, convener of the committee, and on my far right are the committee members who will introduce themselves.
Bailey James Kerr.
Councillor Gordon Forrest.
And online are
Robert Bissett.
Bailey Buchanan.
Councillor Margaret
Anslow.
Councillor Jack Redland.
Councillor Ian Sinclair.
and Councillor Fiona Colley.
Okay, thank you. To my right and left are the officers of the council, beginning with Julie.
Julie Seidel-Gregory, Planning Officer.
Kevin Brown, Planning Officer. Bernard Whittle, Development Management Coordinator. Richard Broadley, Senior Planning Manager.
Ian Henderson, Legal Services Manager. Jim Miller, Committee Services Team Leader.
Arlene Fraser, Committee Services Officer.
Okay, thank you all. Next, members should declare any financial or non-financial. Sorry, have we any apologies?
Thank you, Convener. We have apologies submitted by Councillor Flynn. Thank you, Convener.
Okay. Sorry. Councillor Redmond.
Yeah, I've got a declaration of interest for number 6. Are we all right to move on to the declarations of interest now?
Yeah, we're just moving on there now.
Right. I'll just read it out then. Thanks.
Right.
So it's I'm aware that an issue was raised following a previous decision on a Manor Forest application in relation to a historic employment by me with a company linked to one of the directors of Manor Forest. I'd like to make a transparency statement to note that I was employed around 10 years ago by Stuart Holmes. I do not consider this to be a connection in terms of the Council's Code of Conduct, and I do not consider that I require to recuse myself from decision making on this application. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Redmond. Can we carry on from that and say members should declare any financial or non-financial interest they have in any item of business of this meeting, and identifying, as Councillor Redmond has, the relevant interest and the nature of the interest. Are there any other declarations of interest?
Convener.
Yes, sir.
Convener, could I just take this opportunity at this time before we go into the business just to congratulate you on your appointment and wish you well. Thank you, sir.
Well, thanks very much, Bailey Buchanan. I've learned all from you anyway, so hopefully I'll just be carrying on in your footsteps. Sorry. Councillor Sinclair?
Thanks, Convener. Not a declaration of interest, probably more to do with the procedure of the meeting this morning. I have 2 short telephone appointments this morning throughout the meeting, which I'll be switching my camera off to take. I don't believe that this will hamper my ability to make any decisions this morning, but I will take I will take that as it comes. If I believe that the appointments have been long enough to preclude me from making any decisions, I will continue to keep my camera off. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, no more. No. We have the minute of the previous meeting of the committee before us from October 2025. Are the committee happy to agree it's a correct reflection of that meeting? Agreed. Okay. Thank you. That takes us now to the items to be considered. Can I first ask, are there any call-ups for sites? So no one's sitting here unnecessarily. No. Okay. Provost.
Agenda item 6 has been going on for quite a number of years, and personally, I can't even remember going on the site visit now. I think since it's been such a long time, I don't think it would be a bad thing for the committee to refamiliarise herself with the whole site. So I'm proposing to move the sites on agenda item 6. Thank you.
Okay, happy to put that to committee. The committee happy to go to sites in item 6?
Happy.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Right. Okay. The first item is item 4. And that's P/25/0254/ADV, display of advertisements at the land to the north of North Bank Farm, Bowness. And the report is by Planning Officer Julie Seidel-Gregory.
Thank
Julie.
you, Convener. This application relates to the display of existing advertisements at North Bank Farm in Bowness. The site comprises the southern section of a larger housing development which was developed by Miller Homes, and this part of the site is being developed by Persimmon Homes and is currently under construction. The application includes a large V-stack sign, fence signs, container signs, directional signage and flagpoles with flags. The application was submitted as a result of the unauthorised display of the advertisements at this construction site. Concerns were raised with the applicant following submission of the application in August in relation to inaccuracies in the submitted plans and concerns about advertisement clutter. The applicant has in the last few days submitted a revised location plan and supporting statement. It's unfortunate that the submission was made so late in the process, however, it does not address the recommended reasons for refusal. I visited the site again this week and note that there are several large board signs and flag poles with flags which are not included in the application, and I am concerned that this gives a false impression of actual signage being displayed at the site. It's also concerning that there's further signage being displayed without first seeking consent or indeed seeking the advice of the Planning Authority. The detailed assessment is at section 7A of your report. You'll see that the control of advertisements is exercisable only in the interest of amenity and public safety. In this case, the character of the area is defined as being residential and bounding the countryside in a local landscape area. The advertisements are displayed in relation to a section of the site which is still under construction, and that's acknowledged. However, and it is accepted that advertisements and information display boards are required in relation to construction sites. However, in this case, it's considered that there is an excessive number of advertisements which results in advertisement clutter and overall has a detrimental impact on the amenity of the area. It is recommended that the Planning Committee refuse advertisement consent subject to the planning reasons at section 9 of your report. It's not considered that the revised submission addresses the concerns in relation to clutter and inaccuracies. If members are minded to refuse planning permission today, I would recommend making a small amendment to reason number 2, which refers to a sign which is no longer included, albeit it's still displayed on site. Thank you, Convener.
Thanks, Convener. I called in for the reason that I pass several sites and through my other work, and I visited the site and I'm thinking, so what's different between this site and the rest of it? And it is, as Councillor Forrest in our area, the new development at the End Depotment, there's signs everywhere. So I just want to know what's the difference between this site and another site, because as probably everybody else in the committee was sent an email the other day there from the applicant. I didn't comment, but I had a look at the email, and there's 2 or 3 different sites where the displays look very similar. However, I'm not a sign expert, so I don't know if they're similar, but they look similar. So I would just like to know what the difference is, please. Thank you, Bailey. Julie?
It was felt with this particular application that there was an excessive number of signs, except that construction sites do generally have safety signs on display. They'll have boards welcoming visitors to the site. They'll have boards which advertise the developer that's making, that's construction the houses. However, in this particular case, it was felt that it was excessive. The very recently submitted information from the applicant suggests that they would be agreeable to move in the sales office and some of the flagpoles and signage at that location. Clearly, there are still board signs to the east of the site, which it was recommended should be reduced in number, and there's now additional signage and flagpoles which have been displayed. Each application is assessed on its own merits. In this case, we took the view that we felt it was, a cumulative excessive impact, and we were very mindful of the residential character and the impact on properties which were directly facing these signs and would be for some considerable length of time. I suppose there would be options open to members that if they felt this application was acceptable, we could seek further applications potentially for new signage that's going up, and then there would also be the potential that we could put a condition on that the sales office and signage referred to in the new supporting statement, that could be a planning condition.
Okay. Bailey Kerr. Thanks, convener. So just following off for that then, Julie. Obviously, it's been a Miller Home site and they've sold it to Simon. So would those signs have been in keeping if it was the start of the site? Did Miller Homes have that amount on their site when they started, or is it varied for that time?
That's a really interesting question. I think I understand what you're trying to ask. So normally with construction sites, this larger site was obviously in quite a sort of rural setting. Miller Homes, when they started, if they had any signage or flags, that would have been on Boriston Road, which at that time didn't really have many residential properties. Cars might have been influenced passing by, which is a separate consideration. But any impact in terms of signage advertising that site, I think would have impacted far fewer people and certainly far fewer residential properties. This is a slightly unusual situation in which you have a part of a site which has been sold to another developer, and you've got that sort of quite intense kind of construction that's going on in this part of the site. Which has also attracted all the flags and the signage that we see here. So it's a slightly different impact, which is possibly why we've taken the view that we have in this case. But it's a very interesting point that you raised, Councillor.
Probably so the questions, what I just want to be clear is if it's excessive, fine. We just need to be fair with everybody, and if it's too much, well, it's too much. But I just want it, if everybody's got that threshold, well, it needs to be everybody. So thank you very much, and thanks for your answers, Julie. Thanks, Bailey. Councillor Forrest.
I could remember.
I do remember. How could I forget?
Oh, absolutely. Thanks. I'd like to say I agree with Councillor Kerr, sorry, Bailey Kerr, that, you know, if there's fairness and equity right across the board, that's great. He did mention Gilson, which is at the end of our ward, the end of my street I live in. And the difference there is that none of the flags, banners, posters, anything is actually facing the residential area. They are all facing the main road. So it has less impact on the local people. And just point that out. But yes, if this is proportionate, if it's the same way as everybody else being treated, I fully agree with the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Murtha?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're just doing questions or we're having a debate on thing, but I would very much move the recommendations that are outlined in the report. I do think that fairness and consistency are essential and important. I think the comment about, you know, every application is assessed on its merits, and we absolutely all understand that in committee. I think our planning officers have an unenviable job to be able to, understand all the different advertisements that are going up across all the sites across Falkirk, and that quite often it's only when something comes to the attention and is reported where action can be taken and respective application might be put in. And I think what I'm slightly concerned about is that we're discussing this at committee, where on the basis of a call in on the questions that are there. I think yes, it's an important issue, but if we were to do this for every single example like this, we'd probably have a committee papers filled with this sort of thing. And you know, I'm really grateful that I can go to planning officers at any time to discuss concerns that sometimes then I don't end up having to call matters into committee and take up committee time, committee reports and resources, etc. And I just think it's important to make that point, to be honest, because clearly we have planning policies. It's important that the planning policies are implemented and understood, and that planning officers can judge against those planning policies. And absolutely, things need to come to committee when that there's questions about that, and I totally support that. But I'm just really concerned, given we know the amount of sites that there are across Falkirk, if we set a precedent that about asking this question in relation to this one, when there are clear reasons for it, that we're going to have committee papers absolutely rammed with these sorts of decisions. So I'm happy to move the officer's recommendations. I think the case is really, really clear in this case, and happy to move on.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Do we have any amendment to the recommendations? Sorry, Councillor Murtha, do you have a seconder?
I'll open it to committee.
I'll second it.
Second. I'll leave the legal part to Clerk.
Thank you, Convener. So I think we've got a motion by Councillor Murtagh, seconded by Councillor Forrest, to move the recommendation in the report. And as matters sit, that is the motion. And I don't know if we've got any amendment that's been proposed by any other member.
Okay, then can we just agree the motion?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay. Okay, can we move on to item 5 now, please? That's P/2/0354/FUL regarding 144 Bowness Road, Grangemouth. We have 2 deputations for this item. Can we agree to hear the... Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So the report again is by Planning Officer Julie Seedle Gregory. Julie.
Thank you, Convener. This application relates to the alteration of a vacant building for use as a small hotel. The building was historically used as a hotel, but owing to its dilapidated condition over a number of years, the use was considered to be abandoned, and an application was invited. This application seeks to re-establish the former use, and it would provide 6 ensuite bedrooms with off-street parking to the rear garden. As you can see before you, we're going to run through the plans while I'm speaking, and there's also some photographs showing the external condition of the building and internal. The site history for this building is at section 3 of your report. Members should note that the building was historically used as a guest house, and then planning permission was granted for a change of use to a hotel in 1991. You will also note that there have been 5 more recent planning applications to use the building for residential use. For clarification, that is housing or flats, which were all granted planning permission by the planning authority, but they were not implemented, unfortunately. These applications were in 2007, 2018, 2019, 2020 and 2023. Members will note that there has been a high level of representation in relation to this application as detailed at section 6 of your report. Many of the objections received refer to this application being for a HMO or migrant housing, which is not the case. I'm happy to answer any specific questions in relation to the use of this building as a hotel if required by members today. The application is assessed as being in accordance with the development plan as detailed at section 7A of your report. There are no material planning considerations which would justify refusing planning permission contrary to the provisions of the development plan in this case. It's considered that this type of hotel provision is supported within the busy urban location which is on the main route to the town centre as an appropriate re-establishment of an existing hotel which makes a positive contribution to the character of the surrounding area of Townscape value. It's recommended that the Planning Committee grant planning permission subject to the planning conditions at section 9 of your report. Members should specifically note that there are conditions in relation to visitor occupation duration and retaining a register of visitors. And I would also like to highlight that the applicant was welcome to and encouraging of these conditions being applied to his application. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Julie. Any questions to Julie at present? Julie Kerr.
Thank you, Convener. Sorry, it's me that's asking the questions, Julie. I pass that road daily, and I remember it being, I think it was Ashley House. So, what side of the building will the vehicles for the parking, what side will they enter? Because if I'm looking at the house, is it the left-hand side or the right-hand side?
It's the left-hand side of the building. I don't know whether we can call up the second drawing, which has got the block plan on it. You might have noticed from the photographs as well, showing the rear of the property that was historically used as parking with access taken to the side of the left-hand side of the building. So if you're able to zoom in a bit, there are double gates which are wide enough to get a car through, and then there is a large tarmac area to the rear. If a visitor was getting dropped off as well, there would also be provision for them to drive in to the front edge, park along the front edge of the building, drop off persons, and then exit the site in a forward gear without accessing the rear, the parking area to the rear. I think we've got the roads development unit on hand as well if there's any technical questions in relation to road safety or parking provision at the site.
Good, Julie.
Thanks, Julie. Can you just put that back up, Jim, please? Sorry. The double gates is very deceiving when you're passing. It doesn't look as big for double gates. However, I take your word for it. So the other side, is that a shared entrance? In the right hand side,
That would be a pedestrian entrance.
is
So
it a shared with next door, or is it just
No.
their own?
No, it's
Their own.
each property has got access to either side of the building. Having visited the site, going back to the earlier applications in 2007, that would be more a pedestrian access. It might be a location where you would take the bins down, for example. But it would be more, you couldn't get a vehicle to that side.
Right, okay. And probably my last question. I was saying 6 vehicles in the back.
Just scroll up. There's provision for an excess, so you can see there.
Right.
Looks like
More than
14,
6, aye.
14 parking spaces, which I think you could easily get in excess of that. Previous applications that we had to convert the house, the building into multiple houses, more than one property. We previously had parking and garden areas there. It's quite a considerably large area there, so I think you could comfortably get, in excess of 14 vehicles within that area.
Thanks, Julie. And last question, honest.
Billy.
So what we're saying is it is a hotel
Yes.
and no
No, it's not.
house of multi-occupancy.
No. So the HMOs are very specifically defined within the Licence in Scotland Act. If it helps, I'll just very quickly explain the definition of an HMO. So an HMO, which would be licensed in addition to getting planning permission, is occupied by 3 or more persons from 3 or more families. It's used by them as their only or main residence, and it's a house or a group of premises which has some sort of shared basic amenities. So with HMOs, we tend to, in planning, not always, but we tend to in planning have them as a sui generis use. This application is for a Class 7 hotel. And if you've looked at the plans there, you'll see that there's no shared basic amenities. So what you tend to see with HMOs is shared toilet facilities. There might be a shared lounge area, and you often get, because it's their permanent residence, you will often get some sort of laundry or washing facilities for clothing, a cooking facilities, which is not the case here. This application is for Class 7, which is defined as being a type of use which would be a hotel or a boarding house. Hotels generally provide overnight accommodation to paying guests, and they're primarily visitors and travellers for a shorter period of time, and it's not their permanent residence. As mentioned, there are 2 conditions on the recommendation which would limit the duration of stay and also require the operator to keep a log of visitors that are attending the premises. So I feel quite clear with this particular application that it is not an HMO proposal.
Thanks, Julie. And I think making that clear, and there's 87 objections, and obviously the residents have got concerns, but thanks, convener.
Thanks, Billy Kerr. Go to deputations. Okay, can we have the first deputation, please? Sorry. Councillor Murtagh.
No, that's okay, convener. I'm happy that if you're taking the deputations and then have questions, I'd probably rather pick them up then. I just wanted to make sure not to miss the opportunity. Thanks, convener.
No. Councillor Anslow.
It was just 2 quick questions for the officers. Pardon my voice, I've got a cold. Who's going to administer this register of guests? Because there's no one going to be on site to do so, would be my first question.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a very good question. So it would be up to the operator to keep a log of people who are visiting the site, who are staying on premise. Clearly, there would be a booking system. So if a member of the public wanted to stay for a duration, either visiting the area, they would need to book, and there would obviously be a register of that person visiting. There's no formal reception area, but there still will be staff that visit this property to carry out checks. There will be cleaning staff visiting, and obviously for security purposes. So whilst there's not a reception desk, like a lot of these small hotels and apart hotels, there are staff visiting the site regularly.
Thank you, Julie. My second and final question is, how is fire security going to be maintained? Because in normal buildings you would have some sort of designated fire warden. I've been one myself.
It's another very interesting question. Fire regulations would generally be secured within the building under building regulations. So if there needs to be any fire suppression installed in the building, any firewalls or other fire safety, that would be as part of the building warrant application. There might also be insurance requirements, and also under the Health and Safety at Work Act, they might have to have, for instance, sprays for fires and fire blankets, but those would not be under planning legislation.
Thanks, Julie. I was more thinking about if there had to be an evacuation, how would guests be aware? I know normally you would have a sign in the room, but would there be staff be able to tell them when they're booking in or whatever, to tell them to make sure they read that so they know what happens if there was a fire evacuation?
So you mentioned having signage within the building. Again, that falls under different regulations and legislations than planning requirements. So those requirements would be in the building. There might be fire alarms, there might be sensors, signage, there might be fire blankets and so forth, but it's not a matter for planning legislation to direct fire safety within a building of this type.
Thank you, Julie. That's all for me. Thank you, convener.
Okay. Thanks, Gillian. Thanks, Councillor Ansell. We'll now move to deputations. Sorry, Mr. Bowes.
Sorry, and I do apologise for being a little bit late this morning. Julie, a direct question. This property, as it stands at the moment, is already got approval for Class 7 hotel, and if I'm reading this right, this is purely for the alterations and repair of the same building. So we're not looking to change the actual classification of the building. Am I correct?
That's another very important point that you've raised, Councillor. This building has historically, the last registered sort of legal planning use of this property was as a Class 7 hotel. The building has been in a state of some disrepair over a number of years, and there is very interesting planning case law in relation to an issue that we call abandonment, and that's where a building, if it can't be habited or somebody can't walk in and use it immediately of that use, you could argue that use ceases to exist. So when the applicant came forward to us, we had a discussion about the works that had been carried out to the building, the fact that it's been stripped out, which you would have seen in the photographs there, and we suggested that an application be submitted to re-establish that use, and also for the refurbishment of the building to reawaken that use, so to speak. It's not really a change of use, it's a re-establishment of the use, and that's quite an important point.
Thank you, that clears that up really well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bowes. Julie. Any more questions? Anybody I've missed? No. Okay, then we'll now go to the deputations. And the first deputation is by Councillor Alan Nimmo. Morning, Councillor Nimmo. Could you just give your position and your name and position, please?
Okay, thanks very much, convener. Can I maybe just start off by congratulating you as well on your appointment as convener?
Thank you.
Just to kick things off, I'm Councillor Alan Nimmo, Labour councillor for the Grangemouth ward. and I'm here to represent Grangemouth, and I think it's 87 objections to this application. Just thanks for the opportunity to come before you today to highlight some serious concerns that Grangemouth residents have regarding this application. I don't know if it's maybe appropriate at this stage, Convener, but I would like to request a site visit in relation to this. It's already been highlighted that there are serious parking issues. There's going to be a serious impact on the Bowness Road if that's not addressed. I don't know if you want me to maybe stop there so you can consider.
No, if you continue just now, and we'll note that towards the end.
That's fine. There's a long history attached to this property, and that's already been highlighted as well. It was a hotel, but you're looking at something over 20 years ago, and a lot has changed in this space of time. Public opinion has certainly changed a lot. There's already a large hotel just a few doors down from this property. That's the Lee Park Hotel, and therefore it could be argued that there is no need for another one in such close proximity to this property. There's already been privacy issues highlighted by neighbours, which don't seem to have been taken into account by officers. And again, it's already been highlighted. There's a large car park earmarked for the rear of the property, and parking spaces at the front, or there was previously. Access to the rear car park is an issue. You might get a very small car through the gap at the side of the building, but you certainly wouldn't get any large cars from today, like the big Audis or Mercedes or anything like that through there. Trying to get a transit van, I don't think you would even get a transit van through there into the car at the back. Possible safety issues with entering on and off the Bowness Road, that needs to be considered seriously. And like I said, I'm here this morning representing Grangemouth and 87 objectors to this application, yet officers have recommended granting permission for this, which I certainly don't agree with. We need to take more notice of objectors. They'll not all be in line with the planning regulations, but a lot more thought and consideration needs to be given to local people's concerns. Another issue is the fact that there's no staff going to be based on this property. I'm not content with that whatsoever. I think for safety reasons alone, there needs to be somebody there full time. That's really all I've got to say in relation to this at the moment, Convener, but I would like consideration to be given to a site visit, because I think it's really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions for Councillor Nimmo? No. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, Convener. I suppose, I mean, again, I was a bit surprised to see the reason for a call-in being that it didn't fit in with the area, given that it's been a hotel previously, and as you've said, you know, many things may have changed, but this building has been and understood to be a hotel previously. I just want to ask, you're saying you're representing the 87 objections, many of which characterised in the report are based on things like it being an HMO or being used as a migrant hotel or etc., which clearly is not true and not the case. And I think, can you reflect on you know, our role as elected members to ensure that we're also communicating to the public when they're bringing up issues which are actually nothing to do with the planning application and planning law that's actually there? It's a Class 7 hotel.
Yep. Thanks, Convener. Well, let me make this clear. I don't think it's an HMO. I never have thought it's an HMO. It's quite clearly a hotel stroke hostel. My surgeries on a Wednesday and Thursday night have never been busier with people turning up to ask me about this development. I've made it clear to them at the time it's not an HMO. Obviously, constituents have varying opinions, and it's still 87 objections. 87 people have objected to this, and that is why I'm here this morning.
It's good to hear that you're making that clear, and obviously we know from the committee report last week that there are no issues with HMOs and over provision of HMOs across the Falkirk area, so that's also an important point. I suppose it kind of confused me that you're saying you're representing the 87, the people who have objected. We have to listen, and we should listen always to our constituents. But is it specifically the issues about parking then that you're that you're bringing up in terms of it being an issue that local people are bringing up? Because I'm confused as to, from what is said in the report being brought up and what you're saying is being brought up, where these things fit together. What is it that local people that you're representing are saying in relation to what is a valid planning concern in terms of this Class 7 application?
Well, privacy was one of the main issues that was highlighted, and that is in planning terms.
Okay, can pick them up with the planning officer. I just wanted to be clear what it was, the nature of what you were representing in that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Ellen. Can I hear Mrs. Joyce Grant's deputation, please? Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Can I ask you to just give your name and your position, please?
Yes. My name is Joyce Grant. I'm a resident of Bowness Road, and I'm here to speak on behalf of 30 households.
Great.
And in answer to the previous point there, we do actually understand the application is not for an HMO, so just want to put that straight on the...
Thanks for clarifying that. Now, you'll have 10 minutes. You don't have to use the whole 10 minutes, but you have 10 minutes. Okay?
Perfect.
We can begin now.
I would second what Alan Nimmo has just requested there about a delegation to come and visit the site to see firsthand the issues that we believe exist in the proposed site. I've kind of documented them, so bear with me while I run through them. I believe there is a drainage and environmental risk to the application, because there's no sustainable drainage system being proposed, and I believe that's in direct conflict with SEPA guidance. I've not seen a drainage impact assessment being submitted, despite the presence of a car park and renovation works, and I think that potentially risks non-compliance with environmental legislation. I think the traffic and road safety is a huge piece. Bowness Road is a really busy corridor with constrained access, and whilst the proposal includes parking at the back, again, I've not seen a transport or traffic assessment. And if you've got frequent guest turnover, i.e. no long stays, remote staffing, I believe that with traffic flows, deliveries, emergency access, I think proper consideration needs to be done to that. And I think we have got a risk to current residential safety and amenity. The model for operating relies on remote staff and digital check-in with no permanent on-site management. And for people who stay next door, that's huge concerns about noise, antisocial behaviour, emergency response that we touched on. And again, I've not seen a designer access statement with any clarity on fire safety, disabled access, or operational controls. The supporting statement describes the building as never fit for human habitation, yet there's no structural survey or building warrant evidence to confirm it can safely support hotel use. And I think that undermines the claim of productive reuse, and again raises questions about guest safety. The application said there was no trees on the site or on the neighbouring site. There's actually 15 Lelandii trees to the front and a large established deciduous tree. Sorry, I can't tell you what type it is because the leaves are off it. And I actually believe that tree impedes the coming and going of any cars, any vehicles, because actually it's a bit of a blind spot. I've went and looked at it in person. So in summary, I believe this application contains multiple technical and policy faults. There's no mention it being in a flood area, yet when I look on the SEPA site, it references that Grangemouth is in a flood zone. And I think the lack of drainage provision, traffic analysis, the structural evidence and the operational safeguards risk undermining residential amenity and environmental standards. And I would respectfully urge the committee to refuse this planning application or to defer it pending full assessments and wider community consultation.
Okay, Ms. Grant, thanks very much for your time. Are there any questions? No? Oh, yeah, there is.
Thanks. I just had one quick one. Obviously, we've already heard that previously, like, this building's been abandoned for a length of time, and previously it was a hotel. I don't know how long ago that is, but with you living in the area, has it always been an empty building as long as you've been in the area? Or was there maybe a point in time where you can remember it being a hotel, and was there any problems with its previous use as a hotel?
I do remember it as a hotel, but it's back in the really, really distant past. I think what I would like to clarify, if I may, in terms of the abandonment piece, I've actually reached out to the previous owner who sold it to the company who's making the application, who was very, very helpful in giving me the insight as to why he actually sold it. And he actually had such great difficulty in trying to get the property re-scoped to make it into a family home. So I think the abandonment piece that we reference here is actually quite dangerous, because that lad is actually really quite gutted. He was getting penalised for commercial rates, and actually it was on that basis that he actually gave up the property. So I think the abandonment piece definitely is a bit strong. That would be my theory. I honestly can't remember if it was a good hotel or a bad hotel, but the people who did own it actually stayed next door. That I can recall. They actually lived in the adjoining property. In fact, it was a standalone property, but they actually stayed next door, so they had very clear oversight. And from memory, it was a place where there was a bar, they did food, and I think people coming and going for BP in the day perhaps had an end of shift pint in there. It had quite wide open hours, but certainly no recollection of it being a troublesome place.
Okay, thanks very much.
Just like it, and thanks for that answer on your deputation. But I suppose a final question is the view of the sort of local residents, is it you would rather see this maybe turned back into house or converted into housing? Is that what would be more acceptable to the local resident point of view?
That is the real strength of feeling, whether that be, it's a large property, it isn't bonny, I will only lie, the pictures that you show there for the back, I think it is pretty ugly and pretty dilapidated. The residents' view is houses, whether that be the large house converted into a couple of flats. But I think given we have the Oxgang Hotel, we have the Lee Park, we have the Abbot Singe, we have a couple of bed and breakfasts, the average sort of run rate or occupancy rate for these places is in the high 60s. So it doesn't feel like that people can get accommodation in Grangemouth. So, but I guess that isn't part of the planning criteria, but it does feel like we could actually be penalising the local businesses that support the community and perhaps make it even difficult for them to trade.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Any more questions? No, thanks very much, Ms. Grant, for your time. Take your seat again. Okay, personally, what Bailey Kerr has questions he's asked, has raised more questions actually, and Councillor Nimmo's idea of a site visit might be ideal, and I've proposed a site visit to this application.
I would second that, Convener.
So,
thank you.
Did I come in there? Sorry, Councillor Murtagh had her hand up first. But, it was just to say, I think obviously we've had deputation, so I think before we move to anything, we should really be giving the officers the right to reply. Just as been said, and I think probably a site visit would be a good thing, but it might be good to give the officers the right to reply and then maybe have a few questions that have been risen.
Sure, yeah, it's not a problem. So, Julie, yeah.
I'll ask the roads officer to come in just on the access issue in a second, but just in terms of the concerns raised about drainage and the need for the drainage impact assessment, this is an existing building the car park hard standing to the rear is existing. What's proposed is the refurbishment of the building. It would not be correct or reasonable to request that information. Secondly, there was comment made in relation to building warrant evidence being given to demonstrate that it can be converted into hotel use. That's a matter for building standards as part of their building warrant application. It does not relate to our land use planning assessment of this application. I don't agree with the deputations that there are technical and policy faults in this application. Clearly there's a high level of representation and they don't agree with assessment, but that doesn't make it incorrect in planning terms. And the other comment just about on-site management is for the operator to manage and operate this building. It's not a matter for the planning authority to intervene in. There would be members of staff that would attend the site in terms of cleaning, checking their guests, and so forth, and that would be a matter for the operator. It's not for planning to direct on that. I don't know if Rhodes can come in, and Gary, if you're on the call.
Yeah, morning. Thanks, Julie. Through yourself, convener. So, obviously, I heard the deputation request and some of the concerns around road safety, and I can potentially add to Julie's comment on the drainage side of things as well, from a flooding perspective. So, first of all, our roads development control unit were consulted on the application. It's obviously alterations and repair of a building that's previously been confirmed as a Class 7 hotel. So there is, against our National Roads Development Guide, we have a standard set for parking standards within this type of property. And within the property, we are looking for 6 parking spaces, and there's 14 round the back. I understand Councillor Nimmo's concerns regarding the driveway to the left or the south of the property, I think that is. And our road development control have been out. I've seen photographs, and we've got no concerns of the access to that property. You know, standard parking spaces in the United Kingdom are 2.4 metres. And usually what our road development control officers do is highlight that if it's anywhere below that or in that region and it's not been highlighted in the application that I've seen, our comments back. And just in terms of drainage, from a drainage perspective, we have a development management guidelines from our flooding team on flood risk assessments and drainage impact assessments. And obviously, like I've stated before, this is a previously confirmed application for the type of property it is. And our flooding team there was no need for our flooding team to be consulted on this application through our guidelines, and the criteria did not meet that criteria. I'm happy to take any further questions on that as well, convener.
Thank you, Gary. Any further questions to Gary? Councillor Murtagh?
Yeah, I suppose I've got a few questions that have risen from the deputation, some of which have already been addressed by Julie and Gary. I think the question about over provision, assessment in terms of over provision, and obviously it was mentioned that there are a number of hotels close by and the impact that could have on local businesses. And again, I want to ask directly, is that something within planning policy that we can look at in the determining of an application?
Julie?
Thank you, Councillor Murtagh. That's a very good question. It's not material planning consideration for us to consider what other similar businesses there may be, and if indeed there is an over provision, that this use should not be allowed to re-establish itself. You know, it's a matter for markets to determine the popularity and suitability of these premises.
Okay. I mean, I think there absolutely are questions in terms of, and understandable questions in terms of drainage, in terms of parking, whatever. Obviously, we've seen with some within the report that they have been addressed, and we've had evidence today about that. I suppose I am a little bit confused about the kind of basis on. If you could characterise what the representations, we've obviously got a summary of what the representations are in the report, and I apologise if it came across that I was picking out about the HMOs, but that's because it is mentioned to us in the report And that's why it's important to sort of state that's come across in our planning report for us to consider. Can you give it more of a flavour about what the kind of balance of the representations has been in terms of parking, in terms of road safety, in terms of concerns about this being an HMO, etc.?
Thank you. I think given the number of representations, I would really need some time to break it down and to give you numbers on specifically how many of the representations mentioned either migrant accommodation or HMOs and some of these other issues. What I would say at this point, obviously having reviewed and read every single representation, having summarised them and having assessed them as part of this assessment, is that a lot, a large majority of them mentioned HMOs or migrant accommodation and problems which are perceived that these types of accommodations can bring to an area, which I fully appreciate. However, as explained, this is for a different type of accommodation. It's for short to medium term hotel. If the application is continued to go to a site visit, that's perhaps information that I could share at the next committee meeting.
The final, I suppose, the final question is kind of and it follows on from kind of my first about what we can consider in planning terms. There have been concerns about, it being a non-staffed facility, etc., or, just being kind of remotely looked at. Would concerns about how a Class 7 building would operate, and I apply it to all Class 7, what we make decisions on based on the classification. Is it within planning's gift to be looking at, a material consideration for refusal based on what we believe an operating model may or may not be, given that the operator may in fact change or be a different person or company if we grant permission for that status? Can you comment on that?
Another very good question, Councillor Murtagh. Exactly that, that is the case. Within Class 7, you've got various operating models. You might have an operator coming into this building if they were, successful in getting planning permission. It might be sold on to somebody that's doing very short-term, bus tours, tourism stays, with a slightly different operating model to somebody that's doing, slightly longer 2 or 3 week stays. That's a different offer, perhaps doing, city breaks or something like that. Operating models and the way that premises operate, the off-site management as a sort of standard operating model. Generally, that would be more within the sort of licensing regime, where they would look at the credentials of the operator and how it's going to be managed. It's not a matter that we can control in planning terms, unfortunately, although I do appreciate all of the comments that have been raised on this.
Okay. I just want to ask, maybe, I don't know if it's for Mr. Whittle or Mr. Broad, I suppose the reason I'm asking these questions, and maybe we can get some clarity on this, is my concern as well. I understand many of the concerns, I understand from a public perspective the concerns, and it's good to ask the questions and have the detail and sometimes have it out in the public domain. But in terms of if we make a decision where we're considering things which are not necessarily within the ability of planning policy, for example, weighting things on the consideration of the operating models or on issues which are already determined as the use of the building, what are the legal risks to council in terms of, my discomfort is that if we make a decision and then we're open up to legal challenge of appeal, etc. I don't know whether officers can kind of comment on why it's important for those considerations to be discussed.
That one.
Thanks, Councillor Murtagh. Yeah, if the council were making a determination on a planning application for reasons that weren't tied to the development plan or material planning considerations, then the council leaves itself open to legal challenge on the validity of that decision.
And that would in itself incur legal costs potentially and potential damages, etc., if we were to pursue. So if that was to happen, is that correct?
Yes, potentially it could do.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. That's why I'm trying to be robust in my questioning. Thank you.
Mr. Henderson.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me come in, convener. I think in particular where this is proposed for grant of permission, I suspect the approach, if that was to happen, that would be taken is that the applicant would seek to appeal the decision to the DPA, the Scottish Ministers' Appeals Division. And in that case, if it was a very poor decision, they may seek expenses from the council in that scenario. In opposite circumstances, where maybe there's a decision to grant for reasons that are not material or linked to the development plan, there isn't a right of appeal to third parties, but there is the potential for them to seek review of decisions at the Court of Session, who could decide to set aside a decision and refer it back to the authority to take the decision again. But I think in this case, the most probable outcome could be, if it was a decision that was based on irrelevant non-planning considerations, that there could be appeal to the DPA and a request for expenses against the council to be lodged with the reporter. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions in Councillor Murtagh? You happy with that answer? No. Okay. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, convener. It's probably referring to your request for sites. If you don't mind, I'm not asking you. I'll be speaking to officers, but it's sort of on that. So we've heard from Councillor Nimmo, and we've heard from Mrs. Grant. Yeah. Mrs. Grant. On a number of things. We've also then heard officers talking back on, discussing them and giving us some details on them. And we've heard about parking, which seems to be fine. Access, roads have got no problems with that. Drainage and environment, again, roads have explained that. Drainage impact assessment, the flood zone has been answered. The remote staff, digital, is not anything to do with planning, that's to do with obviously running business. The notification, I think, is covered as well, and I'm satisfied that the planning officers have carried out the role in doing that, and obviously it's on there. I think the comment in there, it was hidden. I don't think it was hidden at all. So if we're going to go to a site visit, the question is what we're going to go to see. Now, there was one question which I think does come under planning, which is privacy, or be overlooking, I suppose, would be the word. But actually, there's another. So that came from Councillor Nimmo, from Mrs. Grant. Mrs. Grant spoke about trees and how there was trees there. Of course, the two of them can contradict each other. The trees would obviously help for that. But if we're going to go and have a site visit, I'm presuming that's about all we could really go and see, because everything else seems to be in alignment.
I'm not sure about that. Parking was one of the items that was brought up, and I think we'd like to go and see the actual parking. There is, apparently sufficient space, but I think it would be good for the committee to go and actually see it for themselves, whether they'll be able to take vehicles in at one part of it. So I think that part, the privacy part as well, again.
I'm sorry, convener.
Sorry.
It's really for officers.
Right.
I'm not wanting to get us getting into a discussion.
No.
That's not what we should be doing. But so I take it, Julie, then that's really what we would be looking at, because officers have already mentioned, I've already proved, I've said that the parking is fine within the area. So really the things we'll be looking at is privacy and trees. Because I think everything else has been answered so far, and is what I'm getting at. So I don't want to get into a discussion between us. We're not meant to do that, I don't think.
That's all right. You're all right.
I think if members wished to go and view the site, I think it would be worthwhile looking at the parking to the rear, and then that would also give a view of the rear of the building, which the deputation request mentioned. the fact that there is some obviously refurbishment works which were commenced in terms of the last planning permission and not completed. We can look at the trees at the front. If members were so minded, we could get access into the building as well, just so that we can look at the current condition and you can understand why we requested that this planning application be presented in the manner that it has.
Right, so in that case, I would happily second the convener on doing a site visit. I just wanted to establish what we were actually going to go and see. So thank you for that, Julie. I'm happy to second the convener on going for a site visit.
Thank you, Councillor Bowes. Is anyone otherwise minded? Councillor Sinclair?
Thanks, Convener. I just wanted to ask if, in deferring any decision on this report today, when this would come back to committee.
Thank you, Councillor Sinclair. The next meeting of the committee, I think, is on the 14th of January.
Thank you. So in deferring this, we're pushing something back for 2 months. That'd be correct.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Sinclair.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Murtagh?
Yeah, I'm not going to put a contrary proposal to go into sites if that's the will of the committee. I just would like to express my concern in terms of, I think that it's always good, it can be good to go to sites to see the general characteristics and whatever. I think what Councillor Bowes was raising and what I'm concerned about is that, and I want officers to be aware that when officers are therefore saying that, or based on their measurements and what they've done and their assessment, that there is the adequate space, I'm not going to go to sites with my measuring tape and a judgment about how wide current cars are, etc. If officers have given a judgment that it does meet policy, it is wide enough, and it meets the criteria, I'll go to sites to look at many things, but not to question whether officers have done the correct assessment of their job properly. I just want to make that really clear.
Thank you, Councillor Murtagh. Anyone else? No? So we have the motion to go to sites seconded, and there's no amendment to that. So we go to sites.
Can we just confirm? Can we just confirm that it's an unaccompanied site?
Oh yeah,
visit?
yeah, of course.
We're not having a committee meeting at site.
No. Thank you, Councillor Bowes, and that's a very good point to pick up. That it would be a site visit to see the physical characteristics of the site, and it wouldn't be intended that there would be a form of hearing, etc., take place on site. So if members are content with that, I don't think we have an amendment to the motion.
I was just going to suggest, obviously, we're going to site and we've had 2 objectors here today, and would it maybe be worth writing to the applicant and saying to them potentially they could come to the next committee, and that way they could maybe answer any of the questions that have been raised about I know some of them aren't planning, but some of them are about the kind of run of the hotel and the sort of target market. I think that might be helpful. Obviously they're not obliged to come, but just to make them aware that that's an option available to them.
Thank you. Councillor Redmond, it isn't practice to advise parties that they've got a right to have a deputation, but parties are aware of that, and you'll see from the meeting today that parties have requested deputations. I would expect if the applicant is viewing this meeting and is then privy to the fact that there's going to be access taken to the site visit, that they may come to the knowledge of the ability to request a deputation at the next meeting of the committee. But thank you, Councillor Redmond.
Okay then, we're happy with that, and we'll move on to item 6. Thank you. Item 6B. Yeah. Okay, item 6, P//21/0717/PP, land to the north of 41 King Seat Place, Madison.
Convener.
Oh,
I
sorry, it's
was-
been
was
agreed to go to sites.
I was going to come in there and ask it. Did we not agree earlier that item 6 was moved to sites?
Yep.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yes.
So it's in. So that concludes the business for today. Thank you very much for your input and your attention, and have a good afternoon, everyone.
Just a quick one
Yes,
before we
sir.
finish, convener.
Yep.
Do we keep the papers, or have we got to be issued new papers for both site visits?
Jim.
Bailey Care, you'll be issued new papers.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks to the
Councillor
chair.
Murtagh.
Yeah, I've got a question on that particular on what we've agreed to go to sites, but I don't know if it'd be better not I don't mean not on the live stream, but like to discuss just by the committee without the public in presence, because it's a sort of procedural issue.
Okay.
Yeah.